Hello everyone, Julian here with a new video. This is a recording of a workshop I did for architects to demonstrate the beginning stages of setting up animations in After Effects. I hope you enjoy and let me know in the comments section if you have any questions.
So the view that we have set up here is my default one, but on the top right, you'll see here where you see default, learn, standard, small screen, libraries, and then you may have some arrows to have more. So these are different work setups that you have in After Effects. And there's one that's called Learn actually takes you through a built-in tutorial through the software as well. So I recommend that you check that out after we're done here, just to kind of recap on a lot more introductory things. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and hit standard. And I'm going to start editing from standard. I'm going to get rid of my plugin over here. Well, I won't get rid of it, but I'll just have my effects and presets open. And how this works is essentially every one of these windows, if I click around, you just kind of click on these different regions, you'll see that there's a blue box highlighted on that window. So you can arrange these windows by moving the titles of those windows. And you'll notice that some of them occupy the same box and alternate between each other, such as effects and presets and the preview on here on the right, or the info panel. So if there's any window that you're seeing here that I have but you don't, you can always at the top go to Window, and you have over here all the different windows that you could have open or arranged in your project. So you can customize different setups for the different stages of your projects. Okay. Now, the way I'm going to have it set up, I'm going to have my projects on the left, like I do right now. But what I like to do is I move my effects and presets under my project. So under my project, you'll notice that if I drag the title of effect and presets, it'll highlight in blue. So these are different places that it can be dropped down to arrange your workstation or your workspace. So I have here my project, and here's where all my assets are going to go. So all my Photoshopped effect, frames, and clips, they would all drop in here. And I have an effects and presets underneath. So this is where I'll keep all my transitions and all my stylizations and different things that I can do to the video. At the bottom, I have what's called my timeline, right? So right now, there's no elements in the timeline, so it's blank. But once we start dropping in things into the timeline, I'll begin to explain the different parts of it. On the right-hand side, I have an audio editor here. But what I really want to have there, because I'm going to be including labels and text into my animation, I'm going to be switching that out. And I'm going to go into Window, and I'm going to switch that out to apparently my character window's already open. Oh, it's down here. So on the bottom right for standard, I have my libraries and my paragraph or my text options down here. So I'm actually going to move them up here because I'm not so concerned with audio. I'm more concerned with text. Let me go ahead and move all these elements that are down there with the timeline into this top window. You can always, next to the title, if you hit the 3 bars, you can close that panel. And so I'm going to close my libraries and extend my timeline there. So this is how I'm going to move forward. Have my project on the left over here, my effects and presets beneath it, my timeline at the bottom, my preview or info. I'm going to keep info down here, character settings, and paragraph settings, and simply move that over to the right. I'm gonna make one more change, actually. It's my effect controls. So for me, they defaulted over here next to my project. I'm gonna actually bring that over to the right as well. Okay, looks like the chat's mostly about the licenses. Are we good up to here? Do we all understand Windows and setting up a workspace? All right. So with that, I'm going to start dropping things into my project panel. So I'm going to look for my files here. I'm going to grab those 2 clips I exported. I'll just go ahead and grab all 3. And I'm just going to drag them, drop them into project right here. So we see we start to get a few things, a little symbol for the file type, the title of it, the color tag. So color tag is useful to identify different elements. So for example, if these are all part of a group and they're meant to overlay or they're meant to be part of the same scene, I'll make sure that they're all colored the same. So go ahead and color them yellow. And I had set up some frames. Here we go. So previously from the tutorials or from certain resources that we had sent out, at this point you may have frames like I do here. I have separated the furniture and the background in different PNGs. I'll go ahead and blow that up and just show you. So basically it's an interior shot and then I have some furniture I'm gonna drop in or animate into. So at this point, you'll have set up with your files from all the previous videos that we've sent out from Yaina, as well as in the PDF for preparing for this course. And so we want to think about this now as we want to do different animation clips, right? But you can work animation clips into other clips. And what I mean by that is over here in the project panel, if I hit right click, I can start a new composition, right? So a project will have multiple compositions. And a composition is really just a single animation. So if you were to animate something to, say, move or rotate, you can then bring that rotating or moving element into other animations. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just go HD here, 1920 by 1080. Frame rate 30, right? As we had talked about earlier. And now here on the time code, right? This is where you set up the length of the animations that you're gonna be doing. So here we have 11 seconds and 17 milliseconds for whatever reason. I'm gonna go ahead and extend my maximum animation time to 30 seconds. Oh, sorry, 10 seconds. No, but this is 10 frames. Sorry. For some reason, that's strange. There we go. So I got 10 seconds and 10 frames on my animation. So now that I've created a new composition, you'll notice I do have something in my timeline. And now it's because there's a composition shown up here, comp 1. If you need to rename your composition, you can always right click, do composition settings, and you can bring back that window that shows up when you first create the composition. So I'm gonna call this composition my section, since I'm gonna just overlay those clips of the panning sections. So right now, any composition that you're thinking of doing, you want to pick 2 things that are going to be essentially one laid over the other to match. Later, I'll show you how to move elements in an animation, but for now, just think of working as this, I guess a slideshow would be the best idea. You have an image, another image is coming up, and then we're going to do a transition effect. And the frame rate that you see for my preview in After Effects is not going to reflect at all what I'm seeing. So since I'm not using this in full screen mode, or it's not a video playing in full screen, Zoom isn't going to optimize the stream of what I'm working in After Effects. So the recording should show that locally. So later in the recording, when you play back, it should be smoother than what you see when I'm doing in After Effects right now. Disclaimer. So section composition, there we go. And I'm gonna drop in those clips that I did. So I'm just gonna drag now from my project panel down into my timeline for the composition, but I'm gonna do so over here on the left-hand side. So I drag and drop there, and now I see here in my timeline at the bottom, I've dragged this element here. It's showing up here in my timeline as a yellow layer, right? Because that's the identifying color I put onto it. And I can slide through the animation now. Okay. Any questions so far about putting in files into After Effects and viewing them on the timeline? All right. So if I hit spacebar, it'll start playing the clip. And notice this green bar that's loading over to the right as I'm playing the clip. What that is what's been rendered by the computer and saved so that you can continue to preview it. So anything that's green is being saved by the computer for you to see in real time. If I make any changes, like if I slide this over, or if I add any effects, you'll notice that the loading goes away and I have to replay through that. Okay, now I have to trim my clip, right? My clip is too long. It doesn't even start at the right place. So I'm gonna go ahead and what this is called is the current time indicator. So this blue bar that I keep sliding to the left and to the right is your time indicator. And you see here my time bar is in frames. So here we have 10 frames, 20 frames, and then here we have 1 second, right? Because 30 frames is 1 second. So then 10 frames, 20 frames, 2 seconds, so on and so forth. If you hit plus or minus into the timeline, you'll see that the scale of the timeline changes. So you can work at different different resolutions. I'm gonna go ahead and hit minus to get out. I'm gonna move my time indicator to where my clip starts. I'm gonna slide my layer over so I can get there. So right there is where my animation would start. And I'm gonna do Control-Shift-D to split that layer at the time indicator. So now I've split the clip in two. It's duplicated itself in the layers, but then you'll see in the timeline, we have one that's solid over here, occupying this area, and one that's solid on the right side to it. So what's on the left now I don't want, I can delete. And I can now slide this layer all the way to 0, to the beginning of my animation. So again, that's Control-Shift-D. In the Mac should be Command-Shift-D. And if you have this layer selected and you put the time indicator wherever it is that you want it, you can go into Edit and split layer. There we go. Control-Shift-D, split layer. Okay, so next thing I want to do, I want to basically set up the scene, because if my other animation is simply a layer that's going to go on top of this one, I can start doing some things to this layer that can carry over to the other one. And what that is I'm going to crop out this rhino view so I can just get the viewport area. And to do that, on the layer over here on the bottom left, I'm going to go ahead and hit this arrow right here next to the color, and it's going to be a drop-down menu for all the effects and properties of this clip. So if I drop down transform as well, we have over here anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this, right? So I click on scale, and then I have these little squares that show up at the corners. So just like Photoshop or Illustrator, I can resize. So this is a free transform. If I hold shift, however, it'll scale uniformly. So I want to scale it up so that it crops into my view. If you have to scale it up too big and you don't see your squares anymore, over here in the preview window, in the center, right here where it says 87% for me, that's your magnification. So wait, yeah, should be there, 25%. Yeah, so this is your zoom level. So if you go to 100, it's basically at the real size. If you wanted to take up your whole window, it's Control-0. Oh, no, sorry, it's a different software. Don't listen to that, don't do Control-0. I accidentally deleted my project panel by hitting Control-0. My apologies, that's a different software that resizes that from Adobe. I wasn't too far off. So change from 50% to fit. There we go. So you just select, instead of a percentage, you just hit fit, and then it'll resize so it fits into your window. All right. Any questions so far about putting down a clip, trimming it to the length that you want it, resizing it for your composition? Nope. Okay. No questions. All right. So now if I bring in the next clip, right, the one with the section in it, there we go. The only part here that I really need to match, I need to match that frame where the animation first starts. So again, repeating the process with this one. So the animation starts about here. I'll go to where it starts to show rendered. Split that layer, Control-Shift-D or Command-Shift-D on a Mac. Delete that previous layer. Slide that layer over. Now my sizing is wrong, right, for this one. But if I open up the properties again of that first clip, and I'm going to go ahead and no, I can't rename here. That's fine. If I open up that first clip and I go down and I click on scale, right, that I edited earlier, I can do Control-C or Command-V, right, to copy, and then I can just select that new layer and paste, Control-V, Command-V. And so I just copied that attribute, that scale change that we did, to that first layer onto the other layer. The reason why that worked is because they have the same proportion, and by having the same proportion, they have the same anchor point, meaning they have the same center point. So when you scale it, it does so in the same way because they're the same size. So now these two should be overlain, and not quite. Did I also move one by accident? I think I did move one. No. Strange. Okay, sorry about that. Little hiccup. I'm gonna just copy paste again. So copy paste scale onto that new one to resize. And not sure what I did. I don't want to promote you. Click the arrow next to the layer drop down. So yeah, that arrow is right here next to the color layer on the bottom left on your timeline. All right. So if I hide the layer, the top layer over here by hitting the eyeball, we see that they're not exactly matched up. I'm not sure what I did to cause that, but in any case, if there was just a mistake on recording and you run into this and it's something that you have to correct for, what you can do, you can right click on that top layer and go to, one second here. I completely lose track of the order that these things are always in. I'm going to go ahead and go to effects, and I'm going to go, sorry, blending mode. There we go. I'm going to go to blending mode. I'm going to set it to multiply. And by setting it to multiply, I now have one clip imposed on top of the other one. So by doing that, I can just go to that first frame. I can select that top layer, the one that's misaligned. Do that drop down again, click open up transform, and this time I'll select position. And now by selecting position, I can use my arrows on my keyboard to move over to the right. So I'm hitting right arrow right now to move to the right, and up arrow, and I can move it so that these clips can match. So it's not the best way to do it. They should match up from the beginning, but I'm not sure in what part of the process I made that mistake. But if you ever run into that, this might be a quicker fix than having to re-export everything. You get away a little bit more with things that are in motion that you do with renderings. So with animation, you want to be more concerned with things like composition, stylization, making sure everything is graphically coherent. It's because since things are in motion, you can get away with some things that aren't exactly looking as sharp as they would in a rendering or as high quality, but timing and whether things are moving correctly or if certain things moving look a little janky, that's really where an animation suffers. So in this case, the overlay makes my preview look just fine. I'm gonna go ahead and let that play for a bit. Okay. So it's looking fine, but it is looking a little slow, right? So I want this to take up 5 seconds, meaning 10 frames. So this is where we get into time remapping. So I'm gonna select this top layer first, right click on it, and over here I have the option for time. And so then I can do enable time remapping. Now I have a time remap down here, and sorry, that's not the right part yet. Not time remapping, you do time and then you do time stretch. And so by time stretch, I can now enter a new duration. So instead of lasting a minute, I want this one to last 10 seconds. Actually, before I do that, sorry, I keep looking over to my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. But once you have these two overlaid and they're working out fine, you want to catch the very end of the animation. So I'm right now going to select both of these layers and I'm going to slide them to the left so that I get to the very end of the clip. So I'm looking at my full 10 frames here, or 10 seconds, sorry, in my timeline. So whatever I'm scrolling out to the left isn't part of the animation currently, but I'm just trying to reach the very end here so that, because so you see at the end of the animation, the two layers don't match in speed. So if I stretch them both to be 10 seconds, but they are not the same length before I do so, they're not gonna resize, they're not gonna retime correctly, right? They're not gonna stretch correctly, and they'll be at different speeds. So I want to make sure that not only do I match up those first frames, but that I also trim any excess to the clip. So I'll go ahead and end the animation right there, Control-Shift-D, and delete the tail end of the animation. Now you can go ahead and select those layers, bring them back to their beginning. Ooh. Right there. And now right click the layer, time stretch, and set it up to 10 seconds. All right. Without moving your, I'm gonna go ahead and do that again. Right click, time stretch to 10 seconds. And without moving your time indicator, go ahead and do the other one as well. Time stretch, 10 seconds. Bring the layers to the very beginning, if need be. So right now I'm in the very beginning, but I don't want to drag. I can either hit plus to get closer, or I can also do control. Sorry, not control. Yeah, control left and right arrow will go between frames for the time indicator. But in that case, it's not quite helping me. I want to select these two, and I'll just go ahead and clip some of it. Just have it start right there. Okay, I'm having the same issue I was having when I set up the composition. For some reason, when I'm typing in 10 seconds, I'm getting 10 frames instead. I guess because I need those additional values on the right side. There we go. And make sure that you type in these values correctly and that you have the seconds not in the last value, but right there. Okay. Any questions so far on time remapping, setting up these layers? We're good? Okay. So moving on. I'm gonna disable that blending mode that I had earlier on the top layer. So I'm gonna right click on that top layer, blending mode, and go back to normal. All right, so the blending mode you should be familiar with in Photoshop, from Photoshop. It's the same thing, the same effects that you get here. It looks like I grabbed the wrong clip. I didn't grab the section. Let me go ahead and bring that in. I'm just gonna copy my attributes real quick. Forget it. I'm gonna go ahead and what I'll do is I'm going to stylize one layer in order to transition one layer to the other. I hadn't realized, but I wasn't working with my section clip. But in this case, if I wanna maybe colorize, let's say what I'm planning to do is I'm gonna transition this clip into a colorized version so I can start overlaying text onto it. And I want that to happen somewhere around here. So I'm gonna right click on the bottom left where my layers are and do new, solid, right? And I'm gonna call this one, let's go with a purple. Purple. And make sure to color that. Let's do like a deep purple. Hit OK. So it's going to show up as whatever size pixels you set it up earlier. So in this case, I put it to the full screen. I'm going to bring it down in between the two layers, right? So right now I'm seeing the top clip, and then this purple is just under that one, but above the other one. I'm going to turn off that top layer so I see the purple again. And I'm going to right click and go back to blending mode, just like I had multiplied earlier. And I'm going to go ahead and set it to not overlay. I want to also maybe get the white to turn purple. I'll set it to multiply again so that I can start overlaying text on top of this. So we have a top clip and we have a bottom clip that's going to transition into having a color. So what I want to do with the top layer is I want to make it fade into clear so that I can see what's beneath it. So in order to do that, I'm going to pick over here where that's going to happen. The color change will happen somewhere around here. And this is where I'm going to start to apply effects. So over here in the effects and presets, I'm going to go down to transition. If I open up transition, block dissolve, card wipe, you have many defaults here, and you can always download more online and as part of plugins. I'm going to go ahead and do a block dissolve. So I'm just going to select it, click and drag, and apply it to that top layer that I want to dissolve. And now I'll open up the attributes, right, of that layer. And now next to transform, I have a new section here called effects. So if I open up effects, I now have block dissolve, which I can open up. And our main concern here is going to be transition completion. All right, and now here's where we start to get into keyframes. So here's where we really need to understand the timeline. I'm going to zoom into the timeline so I see frame by frame how this is going to go down. So right there, I want it to color change. So transition completion right now is set to 0%, and I don't see the effect on the layer, right? So I don't see anything. Transition completion is set to 0. If I click and drag to the right on 0, drag it to 100, I'll see it turn purple, right? So this is what the effect looks like from 0 to 100. And this is the value that we can have change throughout the animation. So in order to start doing that, over here where the time indicator is, that's where I want to start my animation. This is the value that's going to be at that current spot. And if I hit this stopwatch right here, I am going to add a keyframe. And so that little symbol right there now for transition completion, it's locked in that value at 0 at that point. So then if I move over to where I want the effect to finish, perhaps around here, that's about 1 second. Now, if I take it to 20, this is a 1 second animation from right here. And now I change the transition completion to 100. And just by changing that value, a new keyframe has been added for 100 at that point in time. So now if I preview, go back with the time indicator, hit spacebar to play the animation. It rendered now in green, which is why it showed very, very slowly. Now I'll play it back and replay through the green section that's been rendered. And I see how the effect takes place. So that's introducing keyframes into the timeline, how to use it with effects. And now I'm going to show you how to add text and labels to the animation and have them move by using keyframes as well. So I'm going to close the properties on that layer. Any questions before I move on with the keyframes, with adding effects? Can I get from chat really quick, just so I can get an idea on how you guys are at, because we've concluded into an hour. It's going to take me about 10 minutes to get through what we need to get through, but I'd like to know if people are taking notes or if people are following along on their laptop. So if you could just comment into chat, either laptop or notes. Okay. All right, I'll be sure then to be very clear and methodical with the steps, so I only have to go through it hopefully just once, and then the recording will be clear to go through. Yep, it looks like it's overwhelming in notes. Okay, so I'll take it back. Let's say we want to start adding text. I'm going to go to the point animation where I want to start to have text. So this is where my color's placed in. And let's say I want to add a label here for the glass, right? Like I want to illustrate that this glass is, I don't know, triple glazed, insulated. What is the difference between Premiere Pro and After Effects? So After Effects is where you do your heavy duty animation and effects. Premiere is for compositing those different clips together. So Premiere, you can still do some effects and some color correction and things like that to kind of get a movie feel, to get a coherent feel through a bunch of clips. But when you're adding actual like realistic effects or motion things, or if you want to, for example, track pixels so you have motion tracking through a clip, you would do these types of things in After Effects, not Premiere. Premiere is more for larger projects and adding all these videos together into a movie. And After Effects is for making these clips. More on that when I'm finished. But we're at this point now where I'm going to add text. And I can do so in many different ways. So at the top here, I have a horizontal type tool, right, to start typing horizontally. But just like I did the solid earlier, I can create a new text object here, and then I can just start typing in the center and resize it and so on. So let's say we call it hurricane impact or hurricane resistant glazing. Right, so there's my title. I can resize it right here with these, holding shift, resize it evenly. I can double click on it to edit the text. And remember, over here on the right, I had set up my character settings. And so I can change the font. Ooh, looks cool. Not going to spend too much time on typography or typography. So where do I want this to be? When do I want it to appear, etc.? So let's say I'm going to go to the point in time where it shows up. So it's going to show up here. I'm just going to show up right on the center, or with the H lined up to the center window, right there. That's where I want it to show up. So open the attributes of that layer, open up transform, add a keyframe for position, add a keyframe for scale, and a keyframe for opacity. And so with position, scale, and opacity, I can do quite some cool stuff. So for example, well, actually, I'm going to undo everything I just did because I don't want it to look like this at the beginning of the animation. So I have to make it look like what I want it to look like at the beginning, which is gone, right? So, I hear someone. Can you please mute? I'm getting a lot of background noise below. Or can I mute him from? Yeah, okay, there we go. I can hear him. All right, so how do I want it to look? Well, I want it to be transparent. I want it to be, well, not transparent because I don't see what it is yet. So scale, I want to click on scale. I'm going to resize this so that it's very, very skinny horizontally like so. Opacity, take it to 0. There we go. And add a keyframe now for scale and opacity. And add a keyframe for position as well, so that's where it starts. So now I move along in the animation, and I want some visual reference between like this keyframe and where this is where the text is lined up to where it will be, right? So if I'm just gonna there's a way to do motion tracking, but I don't have time to go over that right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a new solid at the bottom left. I'm going to color it white, so it pops. It's fine for it to start out at the size of the whole window. I'm just going to go ahead and resize it into a little line. All right, so I'm going to bring up the opacity for a second to line up this solid to the text. And don't want to spend too much time doing this. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to move, bring the opacity back down to 0. I'm going to move forward. And I want the text to carry over with that edge up until there. So now I can move that white line with the text layer by selecting them together by holding Shift. And before I do so, remember to also enable keyframes on the position of the white solid. So position of the white solid is on a keyframe. Oops, remember to do that at the beginning. Position on the white solid is set up here. Position on the text, scale of the text, and opacity of the text is all set up with a keyframe at this point in time. I'm going to move this over. And now I'm simply going to click and drag the two layers together and line it up to that same edge I had earlier, right? And now you see those lines show up for where this is moving. Right, so this is our original position, and now we have new keyframes added for that new position of the text. So this is where I want my, perhaps, my effect. Well, that's where I want my new position to be. But perhaps I want the text to come in clear earlier, right? So now I see the two objects moving, and I want my effect to start up right here, right? Or my text to become visible right here. So right here, is where I'm going to change the position and the scale value. Sorry, the scale and the opacity values. So I'll bring up opacity to 100 so that it's visible. And I'll click on scale. And this isn't quite the proper way to do it, but I'll go ahead and simply stretch the text how I want it to look. And I'm going to just copy scale and opacity from the hurricane layer, the text layer, copy that, and I'm going to paste it onto the white solid layer. So scale and opacity is now also going to animate in the same way. Oops, no, I don't want to do scale. I want to just do opacity. That's why that was happening. So I undid, and I copied over just the opacity transition for that white line. And there we go. So that's everything we had on the procedure. We've gone through the whole thing. I'll just add one more nifty little trick. If I select that white solid layer, Control D to duplicate, or Command D to duplicate that layer. And you can do a little underline by simply rotating the line 90 degrees. Oops. All right, so you can imagine how you would, I'll go ahead and move the position as well. So when you move position, notice that you have all these different nodes to control for how that line is going to be moving. So this isn't the best way to get another straight line moving, but it's simply to illustrate how that motion can be set up. Right, so I'm gonna now just hit play, let that part of the animation play. All right, so I imagine you see it very slow. But once I export this, it would play perfectly smooth and at the resolution that the clip is set at. All right, so that makes an hour and 10 minutes. Not too bad. I know it's a lot of information. If you're familiar with Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign or Premiere, any one of these other softwares, all the knowledge carries over. It all works together. You can drop Illustrator files into After Effects. You can drop Photoshop files into After Effects. You can do everything we just did to those files in After Effects. And if you change those files in Photoshop or Illustrator, the next time you open your project, or even as you have After Effects open, it'll update those files as you're working on them. So that concludes this After Effects workshop. I hope the content you find it usable. Again, keep in mind the format in which you're presenting so that you format your video correctly. To export, actually, sorry, file, export, and you're going to make sure that you downloaded Adobe Media Encoder. That's going to let you export as an MP4. Otherwise, you could hit Add to Render Queue, and then this will pop up, and you can export as an AVI. You have more limited format settings. So if you're going to go into Premiere with this, you can do AVI here. Otherwise, I would recommend exporting to Media Encoder to do an MP4. Hunter, you're asking about the furniture. I didn't get to, I was gonna do the furniture just like the text. Right now is studio time. I'm fine to continue going, but I know that some of you probably plan to meet with your professors and so on, but I am available. I am working from home and I'm preparing workshops and I'm taking appointments with students. So if you'd like to email me, I'm included, I hope I'm included in that email for the best way to contact me. I'll put my email right now in the chat in any case. This is the best email to contact me. I'll put it over here so you can see it on the recording as well. Oops, I replied to Paula. All right, and I will also follow up with a Google Drive link where you can replay this recording. If you'd like a second part where I show you how to transition the furniture into the interior scene, it's the same principles that we used here, just moving it maybe from top down or adding an effect to have it pop into the scene and so on. But what we've gone over in this 1 hour is really the interface of After Effects, how to set up a project properly, and how to start formatting your video correctly and adding effects. So it's a lot for just 1 hour. So follow up with me if you'd like a part 2. We can set that up. And I hope you all have a great afternoon. And if you come up with an animation, send me an email. Send me your animation. I'd love to see it. I'd love to give you notes or let you know what I think. If you'd like to see more of the animation stuff that I do, you want to ask me any questions about any other work that I do, my portfolio website right now is thevisualmode.com. And, oh, sorry, there's questions. Where will the recording be posted? There'll be a Google Drive link. I'll send it out to the email thread that included the PDF. Same thing with Lumion video. Yes, if you export a video out of Lumion, it's the same thing as the video that I used from Rhino, no difference. Any other questions before we close out? Copy the faculty in the video link, absolutely. Thank you. Someone's not in the thread. Okay. Tell you what, before we start signing off massively, I'll just go ahead and give you the link right now into the chat. So I'll send it out in an email, but I'll also include it in the chat right here. I'll try to send it out to you as many ways possible. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed. Hope it was useful. Just pulling up the link for those of you still sticking around.